Hi, it's me, Theodora Aleshe, and this is Crash Course 2.0. Our second episode will be focusing on the development of agricultural societies during the end of, as well as after, the Neolithic Revolution. During the era, the modern-day concept of a civilization was emerging in many different societies. Civilization, which is a Latin word for city, was marked by certain traits unbeknownst to the small agricultural villages of the early Neolithic period. Civilizations had cities in highly stratified and hierarchical social structures. These cities eventually developed into city-states that ruled not only the area in the city, but also the surrounding agricultural region. To put it simply, a city-state consists of a single government that rules over a group of people or different groups of people. States had complex bureaucratic governments whose leaders were legitimized by certain religious beliefs. This was due to the fact that the state's leader offered protection for priests and supported their rituals, leading to priests supporting the rule of said leader, often with religious reasoning. The foundation of all civilizations was agricultural surplus. This allowed for the formation of almost all other idiosyncratic aspects of a civilization. Most states eventually grew very large, leading to contact with other civilizations and with nomads, promoting cultural diffusion, the spread and mixing of ideas, technology, and diseases between cultures. States were also known for their monumental architecture and civic projects, both of which were overseen by a central government, which were testaments to the amount of resources that these civilizations had access to. Cities began to spring up in sub-Saharan Africa as agricultural settlements became larger and eventually turned into small monarchies. The kings of these monarchies claimed divine heritage and were highly revered to the point that groups of servants were executed and entombed with kings when said kings died. Sudanic religions became more complex during this time. Sudanic people began to recognize a single divine force associated with both good and evil, as well as the rain, as the supreme natural force of the universe. As the region experienced climate change, people began to move out of the Sahara and into areas around bodies of water in the sub-Saharan region, contributing to increasing populations in that area. Towards the end of the Neolithic era, the Iron Age began. This time was characterized by an increase in the use of iron rather than bronze, which was a much weaker and more brittle metal. Iron had to be smelted and could not be created over an open fire, a factor that kept this new technology in the hands of a small group of people for a long time. The technique of smelting was a secret held by the Hittites, the first civilization to use iron, for as long as they could possibly keep the information to themselves. They realized the powerful uses of iron in both agriculture and the military. Eventually, however, this information was leaked, and other civilizations began to use iron, the superior metal. In fact, the Bantu people helped spread the use of iron throughout sub-Saharan Africa through cultural diffusion. Sub-Saharan Africa is extremely rich in iron ores, and several cities in the region became political and economic centers due to the large-scale production of iron. Meroe, located in Sudan and once part of the Kingdom of Kush, was one such city. It became very wealthy due to the amount of iron production that occurred within it, encouraging other regions to engage in trade with the city and resulting in an economic boom in the region. Sadly, the script of the city's inhabitants is currently undecipherable, and historians have had to make inferences about its social and economic organizations from other sources. On the subject of trade, at this point in time, there existed trade routes between the land of Punt, modern-day Somalia and Ethiopia, and the country of Egypt. The area exported gold, ebony, ivory, cattle, aromatics, and human slaves. This is a great depiction of the increasing significance that long-distance trade was gaining at the time. City-states were becoming more interconnected and interdependent due to this fact. As the Iron Age came to an end, civilizations around the world saw the rise of empires. These were large territories composed of many different ethnic and religious groups. This diversity presented an administration problem, as empirical governments needed to figure out a way to unify groups of people from widely differing backgrounds. This empirical age gave rise to increasing complexity in art, jewelry making, painting, and sculpting, which emerged as advanced art forms that were often used in order to create trinkets for the wealthy. These art forms, however, were also methods of cultural expression for the artisans who created them. Systems of writing also became more complex due to an economic necessity. Imperial governments wrote and disseminated illegal codes in one attempt to unify the people they oversaw. In sub-Saharan Africa, Nubia, aka the Kingdom of Kush, was gaining increasing prominence. Although not as large as the Kingdom of Egypt to the north, the Kingdom of the Kingdom of Nubia, located in the Nile River Valley, had rich culture and became relatively successful in matters of trade and militarism. Several prominent cities, which were often thriving hubs for trade, sprang up in the area, including Kerma, Napata, and Meroe. The empire conducted mainly terrestrial trade because its position on the Nile was not very advantageous to maritime trade. Regardless of the fact that the two empires were bitter enemies that were often at war with one another, Egypt and Nubia frequently engaged in trade with each other, and Nubia eventually adopted a lot of Egyptian culture. Pharaohs, hieroglyphs, religion, and the pyramids are among these. Nubian pharaohs were, like their Egyptian counterparts, considered semi-divine or even divine beings who rightfully ruled over the entire kingdom. Another comparison that can be drawn between the two empires is the relatively small role that women could play in social and family matters. Egyptian and Nubian society were both very patriarchal. Women could exercise only a few rights. Unlike Egyptian religion, Nubian beliefs had no place for mummification, but did adopt the Egyptian gods Amun and Osiris. The main Nubian deity was the lion god Apedemak, a war god who had many Nubian temples built in his honor. This new age also gave rise to the emergence of several nomadic cultural diffusers, including Indo-European peoples in Eurasia and the Bantu people in Africa. The earliest record of people who spoke Bantu languages are found in modern-day Nigeria and South Cameroon. The name for this group comes from what they called themselves, Bantu, meaning people. Many of them settled along river banks and open areas of forests. They had canoes that they used to travel along rivers, such as the Niger, the Congo, and others. Those living in western Sudan practiced agriculture and grew mainly yams and palm oils. Eastern and central Sudanese Bantus eventually began to grow millet and sorghum. As nomads, they kept such animals as goats and guinea fowl. When they eventually began to settle down and created agricultural societies, they lived in small villages led by chiefs and also began to engage in trade. They often traded with hunting and gathering peoples living in nearby forests, exporting pottery and stone axes, and importing meat and honey. The people were characterized by their frequent migrations, which eventually helped them to find their way through the West African forest and into the Congo River basin and Great Lakes. These migrations were, of course, not simply spontaneous mass movements of huge groups of people. In fact, small groups of Bantu people moved as they saw fit in search of more resources when settlements became too crowded. They promoted cultural diffusion through these migrations, spreading their language and religion into the areas which they traveled to, due to the fact that they often intermarried with the people that they met on their journeys. Bantus eventually began producing iron implements, which they also diffused to other areas. Other smaller groups of people involved in cultural diffusion in sub-Saharan Africa include Kushite herders who traveled into parts of East Africa, such as Kenya and Tanzania, Sudanese cultivators and herders who traveled down the Nile River, Mande-speaking people who cultivated African rice and established communities along the Atlantic estuaries in West Africa, and those who spoke Niger-Congo languages, who spread cultivation of okra from forests into West Africa. This will conclude the second episode of Crash Course 2.0. Bye, and once again, thanks for watching.